Welcome to the Data Playbook podcast. In this podcast, we aim to help data leaders build a playbook in order to be successful with data. We do this through a series of interviews with other data leaders, experts, and practitioners. And today I have with me Jonny, and the topic of today is building data-centric organizations. So Jonny, welcome to the podcast. Before we dive into data-centric organizations, can you quickly introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thanks, Kris. Thanks for having me here. Quick introduction of myself. So I'm Jonny Daenen. I work as part of Dataminded.
Yeah.
And my role is a bit twofold. So on the one hand, I work for clients. And at the other hand, I work internally on knowledge within Dataminded.
Mm-hmm.
My client work is partially data engineering, but also some data strategy, some platform work, sometimes a bit of data science. So it's a bit of a hybrid role. So I hope today we can talk a bit about all those different roles and how that actually can be combined into data organizations.
All right, cool. So maybe let's start from the very beginning, almost a philosophical question, but what do organizations expect from data? What do they want from data?
Yeah, to me, that's an easy one. We expect value from data.
Mm-hmm.
We look at data in different angles, but there's always this common thing. We want to get value from it. That's a fluffy thing, of course. Like, first of all, how do you quantify value?
Yeah.
But also, what is value in your organization? And that's very depending on the industry you're in, but also inside your organization, it's about the departments. Every department has their own definition of what is value.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, creating value from data is what we should do. And we do that in different means. Like we do that by creating predictions. We do that by creating applications, for example. We do that by creating dashboards. That's the easy one. We all imagine, of course.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more than just creating dashboards these days. With all the AI changes that we already see, there's many things, many ways that we can create value from data. And to me, it's a value chain. It starts from data. We build data applications, data products on top of that. That allows us to get insights from data. Those insights allow us to make decisions, especially on a leadership level, and ultimately to take actions. And those actions, that's where the value lies.
Yeah, so you're saying it's only when the right actions are being taken that actual value is being delivered.
Yes. And that can be like operational improvements. If you need to decide what to change in your operational organization, you hopefully rely on a bit of data. It's not only gut feeling, but you rely on that to make your decision and ultimately to create value.
Yeah. So I think trying to get value from data is indeed is a cliche. It's also been something that's been going on for decades already. It's not something new. While technology has changed quite a bit in the recent years, the purpose of getting value from data has not. So I wonder if you think about data-centric organizations, as you call them, in 2025, what does it take to be data-centric today, and what is it? How is it different now in 2025 than it was in 1995, for instance?
1995 might be a bit a long time ago, but let's maybe take 15 years back.
Yeah.
When I think big data was a very hot topic and was emerging. We had the Hadoop scene and things like that. What has changed since then? I think today we have access to a lot of technology that is scalable on itself. We have the cloud that has advanced. But ultimately, we still fail in some simple things. Like I know 10 years ago, we were talking about Customer 360, having a unified view on all your clients, all the data together. And today, we still struggle with that. Even though we have technology that can handle petabytes of data, we struggle with that still. But technology, apparently, surprise, was not the solution. And the real difficulties that I also see in many organizations is making sure that we can connect all that data, all those bits and pieces of information in a good way. Because when you scale, I think we talk about scale a lot. Everybody wants to create value from data. And let's take that Customer 360 as an example. I want to combine my marketing data, my sales data, my finance data. How do I stitch that together? That requires organization, coordination, standardization, and the dirty word, governance, that nobody dares to use anymore. And I think this is where we are today. We need to make advances in this governance part.
So you're saying bringing data together, it needs governance. Maybe I want to take a bit of a different angle on it. It also needs data modeling, right?
Yes.
And there we've seen in the past, Dataminded, we've been around now for 11 years. So we've seen a lot of these, what I call centralized data modeling approaches, where just literally, as you say, we want to bring data together. That means we're going to build a data warehouse. We're going to build a single model, a single version of the truth. So a customer is a customer is a customer, always for everyone. And we define a customer once, and we can then reuse it 100,000 times, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, I've seen that being tried 10 years ago, 5 years ago, probably 20 years ago. That never took off, right? So why? What is your thoughts on data modeling in this context?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So basically, I think you're saying these data modeling efforts, these master data management programs, they typically don't end well, or at least they don't seem to provide a solution to having an integrated data landscape. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
I also believe that it's not a solution in the sense that you can do data modeling, but a single version of the truth, that doesn't really exist in my mind. So depending on the context that you're using data, you want to have a different angle on that data or on those concepts. Take, for example, in the airplane industry, if you talk about airplanes, depending whether you're selling a physical airplane or seats on an airplane, you might want to have different data, or you'll looking at the concept in a different way. And so there, I think it's important to acknowledge that we need different versions of concepts depending on how we use it.
Yeah, no, that's very true, because if I look at some of our customers, I know an energy client where for different departments in the energy client, the customer is something else, right? So for producing energy versus selling energy versus maybe installing energy systems, the notion of a customer is not the same thing.
Exactly.
The same with, we worked with train companies where two different departments could not agree on what a train was, or like an educational company who couldn't agree on what a school was. And you can never solve that in a data model, right? It's like departments look at those things differently, right?
Exactly.
If you zoom out a bit, there are data successes, and that's why companies keep on investing in data, but there's also many data failures, right? So can you name some reasons why data initiatives typically fail?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of reasons, but one of them is also a heavy focus on technology, like the illusion of buying data technology that will solve everything. Or, as you said, the illusion of having like this one concept that masters them all, that's a single version of the truth. It's always a bit more nuanced than that. There's no single silver bullet to solve your data organization. And I think the main reason is also always you need to be able to adapt to the context of your organization. Like specifically with that concept of like an aeroplane, you need to adjust when you use it to the context. So there I think many companies face some challenges in connecting this technology with, the overall business. And what is important to me is always like, what is the strategy of the business? How do they operate? In which industry are they? What are the regulations? And all these specific things make up for the company context. That is important in everything you do with your data. So having a disconnect between your operating model, what we call it, like your people, your processes, and your strategies, having that separate from all your data initiatives, that is, I think, a bad call to make. You need to make sure that everything you do in your organization lives and breathes your specific DNA of your operating model.
Maybe let's zoom into that a bit. I know you have a mental model. You've presented it in the past at conferences where you say a data organization has three components: an operating model, a data platform, and data products.
Yes.
Can you walk me through those three things? What are they, and why are they useful?
Yeah, to do those exactly three topics, it's important to realize at a specific scale in your organization, it makes sense to start separating a few concepts. Like if you have a small organization of like 50 people, typically all data activities are bundled together. You have an IT team or a data team that does everything. And you request dashboards to the team and they build some things. But everybody is still aware of your full organization. when your organization starts to grow and you have different domains and departments, the needs start to change. And there we see like a drift of specific things. To be more concrete, because this is all a bit fuzzy, what we believe is very important in organizations is that you enable departments to do their own data workloads, to do their own data science, their own data engineering, to build their own data products. And so there we believe data product thinking, thinking about data as something you offer as a product that you keep alive, that you keep healthy until it fades away. That's an important principle to adhere to. At the same time, if you want to empower many people to build those data products, you need to offer them something. And you cannot just give them the bare tools. You need to give them a real platform. So a self-service platform is the second component. And then thirdly, for those first two components to tie in together, you need to weave in your own DNA, your own fabric of your organization into them, your own processes, the awareness of your own profiles that you have in the company, the strategy you have as a company. All of those, they trickle down into these first two aspects. So you have data product thinking, a self-service platform, and an operating model that is taken into account in the first two.
Okay.
Does that make sense from?
High level it does. Of course, it's always interesting to zoom in a bit deeper. So take the data platform, for instance. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you see when people start building a data platform?
That's an easy one. We always have an impression like, we can buy this, right? We can just buy a data platform. You buy Databricks or you buy Snowflake or Starburst or whatever. We buy a technology. Here is the data platform.
Because in essence, it's true. It's a platform on which your data is stored and on which you can process your data. So check, right? Done.
Indeed. But that check is often because we think very simplistically about data platforms. We still think about it from an IT mindset, like this is compute and this is storage.
Yeah.
Check. We have compute, we have storage. You can write some SQL and we're done, right?
Yeah.
But there is so much more. If you want to do data in a healthy way, there's a lot of data capabilities. Compute and storage are like the really bare minimum. But when I build a data product, let's say I built that customer 360 data product. There's a list of all the customers with all their properties all tied together, and I want to offer it to you. How do I deal with versioning, for example? How do I connect to other data products? How do I get access? So any operation that I want to do on my data product is something I have to make a decision on. I have to make the call like, okay, how do I give access to my data product? Am I going to do this in the right way that everybody does? Am I going to invent my own way of giving you access? So all of these aspects that I need to think about, those are data capabilities. And that's where it comes in. Like when we buy this technology, you will hit a few of the data capabilities. Most likely you will also get some data access mechanism. But how does it fit in your organization? For example, if I would need an approval for that customer data, this is sensitive data. When I would give it to you, like who regulates that? Who needs to give an approval? That whole process should be tied into a platform. And that is the difference between the bare technology and a real platform. It covers all the capabilities your organization needs.
You hit a few important concepts there. And one word I want to zoom into is you mentioned tied in.
Yes.
We often see governance and data platforms being completely decoupled, right? Where there's a big governance program running for 2-3 years, they set up governance tooling, and then there's also a big data platform team running for 5 years, and they set up their technologies, but they barely even talk to each other, right? And there, maybe you can explain it better than I can, but we believe those two things have to be tied into each other. But what does that mean? Having governance on your platform tied in, what do I get that I don't have today?
Yeah, good point. I think you will get sustainability, and not sustainability in the ecological sense, but in the data sense. You will be able, if you do this the right way, to have a platform that can survive and adapt over the course of many years, even if technologies are swapped out and swapped in. But tying in data governance means to me that the processes that you need are actually provided as part of the platform experience. If somebody builds a data product on your platform, they get nudged in the right direction, and without knowing, they abide by the rules. So if you have conventions, naming conventions, data sharing conventions, and you offer that in a self-service way, that they can do it themselves, you can build into that process automatically some checks, so to make sure that they abide by all the rules that you have.
So in a way, it is about providing paved roads that out of the box, is if I build a data product, those paved roads make sure that I already comply with whatever governance is important to that client. So am I saying that right?
Yes, exactly. So indeed, you have some paved roads. Of course, you don't have everything from the get-go, all these paved roads, all the things that are standardized. But there's a few important things to get right, like naming conventions and things like that allow you to build on top of, to have at a later stage, like health checks or things like that.
Yeah.
And the example that you gave, like a governance track that is completely separated from the technological track, that could be like, we set up a data catalog and we require everybody to manually fill in their data product properties. Yeah. And then the project of having a data catalog, it's completed after 6 months, check. Then when you return 1 year after, it's a graveyard. Yeah. It's outdated, it's not complete anymore, and nobody uses it. So the real value of that data catalog is zero. Actually lower than zero, but it has a really bad value. At the same time, if you would do this differently and capture, for example, when everybody registers a new data product, automatically couple that to a data catalog, then it's always in sync, kept up to date. The flip side of that coin is, of course, you will have to build something to integrate that again.
And I think the other change you mentioned is domain-owned data products, because if you look at not even 10 years or 20 years, but 5 years back, most use cases were built by a central data team.
Yes.
Whether that was a central data warehouse team or a central team that knew Spark or a central team that, like most companies, at least we worked with, they were still, like the amount of use cases they had, they were still manageable by a central team, right? And in that world, some things are a lot easier because you have one team, you like offering those capabilities are a lot easier. But then when you say, no, we want the domains to be able to be responsible for their own data products, then you need to think about the capabilities you mentioned again in your data platform. Like, what are they? But not only what are the capabilities, but also how do I offer them, right? So what does domain-owned data products actually look like in practice?
Yeah, it sounds like a cool thing. At the same time, it's also quite vague. Domain-owned aims to solve the problem of having like a split between the knowledge and the skills. That's the problem we're trying to solve. The knowledge is in a domain. Let's say the marketing domain has a lot of knowledge about marketing. But the skills of building data products, if you centralize that in a central team, obviously there's a disconnect. So you throw over the wall a question for a new dashboard. These people, they don't know what to build. So they know technically how to build it, but they don't really have knowledge. So they start a few steps. They get data. They don't really know which data. They have to explore it. They need to process that data, clean that data, put it in a dashboard, and throw it over the wall again.
Yeah.
And then the marketing department says, oh, this is not what we asked for. This is like a typical scenario that happens. It takes a long time, and it's low quality. And this is really painful. So the whole philosophy of domain-owned data products means we put the data product inside marketing. Yeah. We also give them the skills to do so. And that's an important one, because if you put something, ownership, in a domain, there are things that they will be able to do. They have some rights to do, but they also have some obligations. And finding that balance is key. Plus, you need to enable them to do so. If it's like people who have zero data knowledge or data engineering knowledge, they won't be able to deliver something. And that's where the platform again comes in. Like, how can we enable these people to combine their knowledge with a few additional skills to start building good things?
And there, I guess, offering certain capabilities is easier than others. But concretely, it's easier, I guess, to start having domain teams do their own dashboards. That's easier than, okay, now build a real-time pipeline that does machine learning in real time, and the like automatic retraining of models and stuff like that. It's not a lot of departments that can handle that. But a lot of departments do have the request, like, I want to build my own dashboards, right? So how do you look at that? You want them to do it in self-service, but what does that mean, and why is self-service such a game changer for those teams?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think self-service, again, aims to allow people to do domain-owned data products, to allow them to build things themselves. But self-service in itself means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So when I talk with business people about self-service, they sometimes have completely different expectations than a technical person. What is key
in what
there?
sense?
Sorry?
In what sense? What do business teams expect from self-service?
They imagine people doing everything themselves, typically, like building that dashboard from scratch and everything just clicks together. While if you ask a technical person, they look at self-service sometimes with technical glasses. Like, if you have this tool, you can do it yourself. But there's like this gap between, what can these people do and what tools do you give them? Like, there's this gap between. So it's really important to clarify what is self-service. And thinking about data capabilities helps, at least from my end. So your example of building dashboards, if people start with building dashboards, the first question you will need to ask is this a capability we want them to do themselves? Do you want them to build dashboards themselves? If your organization is 80% reporting and dashboards, yes, of course, because the impact of making it easier to build dashboards will be huge. If at the same time, in another situation, you see like, okay, there's only one team building dashboards in Power BI, they will probably, it doesn't make really sense to scale that to 20 teams. Yeah. Maybe the other teams need something else, like AI features or LLM features or something like that. Then those capabilities are more important. So providing the right tools and capabilities to those teams depends on your organization context.
And let's make this super concrete. So if we say we want, because this honestly has been a buzzword that's been around for at least a decade in business as well, we want self-service BI. Everybody wants self-service BI. What does that mean from a data platform point of view? Give me a license to Power BI or Tableau and give me a connection string to the data warehouse and I'll do whatever I want?
Potentially. But it depends a bit on the context. It's always the answer. It depends, of course.
You're a true consultant.
Yes. Sorry. So how I imagined true self-service in this context, like how far can we go, is that you have a marketplace for data. Like, I need to have this data for my dashboard. I can look it up. I can discover data. That's one capability. I can request access to that data with a specific purpose. For example, I see there is this customer 360 data product I want to use in my dashboard. I put it in my basket. I say I need it to make a report for the CEO, for example. That's my main motivation. I press request. Somebody approves it. I don't have to contact or call that person myself. It automatically happens. And when I get approval, there's a link, open in Power BI, whoop, and I get my data in Power BI. This is like a real frictionless experience in my mind.
Well, it's frictionless, but again, it's the word that you use, tied in. The governance is tied in again. So
exactly,
you don't just get here's credentials to the data warehouse, have fun and see what you built. Right?
Indeed. I don't have to go to an IT guy and ask, give me permissions on these tables in your data technology or in your data warehouse. No, it's on a much more abstract level that understands the core strategy and regulations of my organization. The whole process is aware.
And that is baked in a concept of a data product.
It could be.
Or not.
Ideally, yes. Yeah. Ideally, yes, that's tied in. Because to me, a data product, this is about a purpose of using data. A data product is a reason why you want to process data. For example, if I need to answer questions from the CEO about my customers, that's a good purpose of starting a data product. If I need to build a report or a dashboard for finance, that could also be a purpose. It can also be a purpose to consolidate data. To provide a customer 360 data product for the whole organization is a purpose in itself. And this actually, we used to think a lot about tables and schemas and technological concepts. Data products, to me, is one level higher. It is actually an atomic unit of data. Again, now I'm going the academic road, I think. An atomic unit of data that bundles a few things together and allows you to reason more about data. not in the sense of technical reasoning, but more semantic reasoning.
Exactly. It's an atomic unit on a business level, right? Not on a technical level, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and there I agree. Where I've seen like those access permissions being managed on a very low level, and I've seen clients where someone owns a specific table and they get or a bunch of tables, and then they get 100 requests from Kris wants to get access to those 100 tables.
Yes.
I don't know what to say about it. I don't even know Kris, so I'm like, and I don't know why these 100 tables, right? So on a technical level, that makes a lot of sense. You could even go on a column level or row level access, whatever you want. But on a technical level, that makes sense. But on the business level, Kris needs access to those 100 tables. That's Chinese, right?
Indeed, that doesn't mean anything. And that's where you also often get long wait times. Like this ends up in somebody's mailbox. They have to check, like, I need to call somebody to ask, who is Kris? Why does he need data? And that's an important one. Why does Kris need data?
Yeah.
And if the request would come in like somebody is building a data product to answer questions from the CEO and they need customer data for that, that's a whole different game you're playing then.
You can reason about it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Data products put the why in access requests, for example.
Yeah, because I know before the notion of data products, a lot of access requests in essence boil down to, I need access to data because I'm part of the BI team.
Yeah.
Give me access to all the data.
Exactly.
and that's what happened. In essence, it could be one request or 100 or 1,000 requests. But in essence, because I'm part of the BI team, I need access to all the data.
Yeah.
Or because I'm part of the marketing analytics team, I need access to all the data. But that is not a valid reason.
It does not answer the why question at all.
No.
I mean, for some people it might, but in general, on a business level, it gives you no insights on who is using what data. And then even if you have granular access, like you ask specific tables, you get the concept of data hoarding as well. Like people start accumulating access. And after a year, you don't know anymore why people have access to specific parts of the data. So you can't even revoke it anymore. Imagine explaining that to an auditor. Like, yeah, Kris has access to these 20 tables.
Why?
We don't know why.
Well, why? Because he requested the access.
Yes, that's as far as you can go.
Yeah. No, and then people move. Well, even if they stay within the company, they move to different departments, get different roles, get promoted, but you still have the data.
They take along the permissions.
Yeah, you have the union of all the access, right? That doesn't make any sense. Well, people shouldn't have access. Your data product should have access to data, right? And
indeed.
You can ask to collaborate on a data product.
Correct. Yes. So you decouple permissions of data with people. You assign people to data products, and you assign data products together, but no more do you assign people to real bits of information.
So if you take that to the extreme, the notion of self-service, I sometimes say, if you want to give a client all the flexibility that they need, you should ship the client a compiler or a programming language, because with that compiler, you can build whatever you want, right? So it's all the flexibility you need. In the same spirit, can we give a client too much self-service? Is there such a thing?
That's a good question. Well, the extreme form of too much self-service or the extreme form of self-service is you just give them an AWS account.
Yeah.
Here you go, full rights, you can do anything. That is also self-service. But then you get some friction because they don't always have the skills to operate that. They're not in the business of creating virtual networks or VPCs and things like that, or setting up compute or clusters. No, they want to get value from data. So by doing that, extreme self-service, you will actually give them more friction to create value.
Yeah. Indeed.
And there, I think it's important to understand who is a user, what skills are in the organization, what do we need to automate for them.
Yeah.
And that's, again, weaving in your own company DNA in those processes, in that self-service.
And that's different per organization, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Because that's, well, you were there. We organized a leadership roundtable for data leaders a couple of months ago. And what I found interesting there is that everybody agreed that having one central data team didn't work for their organ. Like, we work with typically larger clients, so not like the SMBs that have 2 data people, but larger clients. So they all agreed that they wanted some kind of self-service, and they had federated teams. Everybody agreed with that. But to me, what was interesting is that not a single company had the same exact structure of self-service as the other company. Like some companies said, okay, we do all the engineering centrally, or all the source aligned data products or whatever, making the data available, we do centrally.
Yeah.
But then the individual data science use cases, that is separate in the domains. And while others say, no, we actually don't have that many data science use cases. We have one central data science team that does all the data science use cases, but your BI is decentralized, right?
Yeah.
And there's not one right or wrong answer. It's also what you mentioned about the strategy of organization, where you are in maturity level, where you are in complexity level, and that can change over time, right?
Correct. And it's more granular than typically we look at the centralized versus decentralized as one decision, but it's not a binary decision. You have to make those calls, in my opinion, one level deeper on the data capability level. And it's exactly what you said. If in your organization it makes sense to decentralize BI, go for it, because you will have the highest impact. There's only 2 BI use cases. Please don't centralize.
Yeah.
The same happens with AI. That's actually an interesting take. We see companies starting with AI.
Yeah.
And then you will need to give people the opportunity to still innovate, but you don't want to fully roll it out to your full organization. Maybe you still want to explore a bit. And there, if one team starts with an AI use case, please let them do on their own. Give them the power to do so. And when you see it maturing and you see the need rising, it's crucial that you time it right so that you can roll it out to your whole organization. Maybe you want to give them a ChatGPT access.
Yeah.
When do you do that? How do you standardize? Timing is key there.
But why is this so hard? Because that's something a lot of data leaders don't understand. Isn't this just installing a bunch of tooling?
Yeah. And up to some degree, I'm inclined to say yes, but the full answer is no. It's not just the tooling. It's exactly because of those needs in any organization, they're always different. At a specific moment in time, specific organizations, you have different needs.
Yeah.
Depending on your team, your existing tech stack, your industry, your regulations, this will heavily influence what a data platform means for you. And the ultimate data platform doesn't exist. You can get data technology from vendors. You cannot buy a data platform.
I think it's also interesting what you mentioned for AI, like when to standardize and when not. Like if there's 1 or 2 experiments in one corner of the organization, then you don't need to standardize. On the other hand, we've also seen companies go to the other extreme, that every idea that every department has, like, sure, do it in the technology that you want. And then you get a very bloated landscape, completely not standardized at all, which I always say, us engineers, we like to build things.
Yeah.
Ideally, even new things. Like that's what we like to do as engineers. We like to come and say, whatever you build is crap. We're going to build something new,
Yes.
right? And that's a disease of engineers, because we all like to build, but we don't like to run stuff, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. So I wonder, things like standardization is very boring. Like as an engineer, like I don't want to standardize. I am my own special snowflake, so I want to do my own little thing. How do you convince other engineers, or how do you convince data departments that standardization is important?
Yeah. Those are 2 different personas that you need to convince, I think. Like if you want to convince engineers, I'm an engineer myself. I also like to build things. So I have to keep things away from me sometimes. The way I solve this, that's maybe a good reflection moment. The way I try to solve this is I also like building automation and governance tooling.
Yeah.
Like this is also something that needs to be built. And I can get really excited about learning how an index in a database works. I really love going low level.
Didn't you do a PhD on that?
Yes, exactly. So I love to go in some of these details. But I also learned, like, when you build something, you need to run it.
Yeah.
And I love when people own specific things and keep running it. That's really important. And so I learned the hard way that the more you build, the more you need to run.
Yeah.
So you need to be really careful on what you build and what is critical for your organization. So there, it's also our tasks to convince engineers, I think, or to at least show them how to best make these decisions and show them what the impact is on the company when building things themselves. So there, I still get to build some things. That is mostly also gluing things together and also providing process automation. And so I still get to build stuff and also run it, but also automate a lot of things. So that's on the engineering side.
Yeah.
And then the second part was convincing leadership to
standardize.
I think leadership is easily convinced that standardization is needed. I do notice that in many organizations, leadership is becoming a bit more hesitant to label it as governance. Like it's becoming a dirty word.
It is.
And we should try to not shy away from governance. It's still it's not because people don't like it and people associate it with, as you said, working for a year in a corner on a data catalog or something and all kinds of rules that give friction. We should make it accessible and also make it something cool again. that won't happen probably. But we should actually try to bridge that gap between engineers and business to make sure that they can connect again. And this is a difficult task. I think on the business side, people are convinced that standardization is needed because they see the wall that they hit when it doesn't happen, and it costs a lot of money. Again, the customer 360 example is really great. If you're using a customer ID and I'm using a different one, and 2 years down the line, we discover like, oops, we cannot join our data. Simplified example. This hurts the company a lot.
I do want to nuance it a little bit because I feel business leaders want to reap the benefits of standardization, but they don't want to do the investment. Right? So they always have a very particular use case in mind that always needs to go live yesterday. And whatever extra effort you need to put into it, it's a hard sell to them, right? So that initial, and that's also where governance gets a bad name, because governance is the thing that slows you down in shipping stuff. If you do it wrong, right? Once your governance is in place, you get a whole lot of acceleration, and it's a lot faster because your team can focus only on the use case, and all the boilerplate is away. I like to say it in a way like you should not install a data governance police, but it should be there to enable teams. If you cannot accelerate teams by bringing governance, then you're failing, I think.
Yes. I think that's a good conclusion. Any governance track should accelerate. It should not stop you.
Yeah.
And just buying governance technology will typically not accelerate people because you still need to integrate it. You need to sell it to your whole organization. So what we also do at some organizations is we build in the governance. As we build new components of a data platform, we build in the rules of the organization inside that component. For example, requesting a new data product. If you do that according to our forms that we built, it's automatically compliant.
Yeah.
And this way you accelerate people because they don't have to think about how long does the name of my data product need to be? What kind of description do I need to put in? How do I request access? No, it's all built in.
So you basically take the burden of the effort on you, on the platform team, instead of transferring the burden to the individual product teams.
Yes, indeed.
As much as possible, you try to.
Indeed. You still need to convince leadership that this is important because it will require some extra effort when developing the platform.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's another way. It's the mindset of creating a platform. And again, if you would just buy the data technology, you won't get this. You will need to add a layer on top, the interface to your data technology. This is the platform. And this is where all these company-specific things come in.
I also think, if we're really being honest, that governance is such a bad name because a lot of companies by now have invested in governance and invested millions maybe, and a lot of those investments have returned zero.
Yes.
Because indeed, it's either a very academic exercise focusing on very theoretical concepts of what an ideal data organization should look like, or it's a pure tooling effort, like let's buy the most expensive data governance tool we can find and roll it out and force it on people's throat.
Yeah.
Or it's very, let's say, technical thing where it's governance on what we discussed on the lowest level, like, oh, this encryption key needs to be stored in that way, and this row level security policy needs to be enforced there, and like it's a lot of super low level technical details that basically you lose business buy-in super quick, right?
Indeed. And there's a huge disconnect then of what business thinks is governance and what technical people think is governance. There's a big gap between.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, in maybe it's a poor analogy, but in a way, if you drive home after the podcast, there is governance on the street. Well, maybe here in Brussels, not so much, but no. But the fact that there is a red light and people actually stop in front of a red light speeds everybody up, right?
Yes.
Without that red light, it would take you longer to be home.
Yes.
You have the concept of I drive on the right side and the other side is for oncoming traffic, right? And I don't drive wherever I want. I drive on the right side. I have certain speed limits. It slows me down now, but it speeds everyone up, right?
Indeed.
And that kind of governance is accepted because you need to get your driver's license once. And then you kind of know, okay, if I play the game by these rules, I can autonomously move, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that brings me to an analogy that you made at a conference where you say how not a lot of people know how to make a car, but a lot of people know how to drive a car, right?
Exactly.
So what is that about? Can you talk about it?
Yes, and I think it's a good analogy. I partially stole it from you, I think, even. So basically, if I would need to go from point A to point B, let's say I need to come from home and come to Brussels, there are two options. Simplified, either I use my car, or I buy a car, or I build a car. Building a car, I'm not that good at. Driving, debatable, but okay-ish, I guess. But I think it's clear that just driving a car that I bought brings me faster to where I need to be. If I need to go from point A to point B, I use a car. I don't build one. And this is exactly the thing with data. We also, as data engineers, do a very simplistic thing. We bring data from point A to point B. This is what data products are about.
A side note, a friend of mine called us for a long time expensive file copy.
Yes, you can look at it like that. So the real simplistic view of data engineering is this. From point A, copy to point B. And also there, the car analogy holds. It's not a car in this case, but it is the tools that you use to get data from A to B, to do cleaning, to do ingestion, to do PII processing and things like that. But having tools available that bring you faster from A to B is more valuable than, let's say, an AWS account with a bunch of tools that you still have to figure out, glue together, and build your own mini data platform.
So in your experience, AWS is not a car?
No. AWS is a bunch of tools, car parts, that you still need to stitch together.
Yeah.
It's not a platform. It's a bunch of services, a bunch of tools.
All right. I want to come back to the AI ML hype that you talked about earlier. With Gen AI, it's almost unavoidable. When companies want to do more with data before, now they want to do even more with data, right? So how is that impacting our world and how is that impacting data organizations?
I think that is a very interesting question. If we get back to the multiple layers of data organizations, so we have the data products that we want to build, we have the data platform, and we have the operating model. I believe AI can make a difference in many different aspects. The most obvious aspect is many of us are using ChatGPT or similar tools to accelerate our own work.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. You also see companies saying, oh, we want a chatbot. Everybody wants a chatbot these days. Or at least something with AI ML that they deliver as a product or embed in their products. So that's at the end of the chain. You need data for that. So you need to organize for that. You need to have the tools to build new ML models, for example, or to use existing ML models. So this means extending a data platform, because that's the place where I believe these things belong. You need data to be combined with ML. So extending your data platform with AI capabilities. Do you want training, AI inference, ML inference? Those are capabilities that you can add to your platform. There again, you could see like, okay, there's only one team using that. We give them full freedom.
Yeah.
After a while, we see other teams it's bubbling up in other teams. They need this as well. Okay, we standardize and we roll it out and we accelerate the whole company. Those are things that you can do within the framework that we discussed. At the same time, I think little attention is also going to optimizing data pipelines with AI. We can use it as forms of code completion, like in cursor.ai. We can easily write code using AI, but also we can use AI inside data pipelines. For example, at one of the clients I was active, they have a bunch of descriptions of events, not technical events like real life events, concerts, sports events, and they wanted to basically relabel their events. They have a bunch of sports events, but not on the level of the type of sport. So it just says
basketball versus football.
Exactly.
Okay.
So is this about golf or tennis? We cannot filter on that.
Yeah.
You have to look into the description. And so one of my favorite technologies, BigQuery, that's where the data was stored. But they have a feature where you can basically use a prompt in your SQL statement. You can just say, this column, description, apply this prompt to every cell.
Yeah.
So if you have thousands of event descriptions, you just say, extract from the following description the type of sport. You run that, and 5 minutes later, you have a new column that says golf, tennis, basketball. And this took us a half an hour to do. Previously, this was a week.
That's insane, huh?
Yes.
Because not so long ago, you would have to train your own model tailored for that, and you would have to test it, and sometimes it's good, sometimes not good. And now you basically write another line in your SQL query, and if the result is good, you keep it. If the result is shit, you throw it out, right? But
Exactly.
Yeah, it's insane.
And I think our tool stack will also start evolving to incorporate these kind of things. Because scaling that is still a bit hard technically. Like LLMs on that scale, that can be huge. If you have a million of rows, that's a lot of load. But I think this will fundamentally also change how we as data engineers build data pipelines.
In which way?
This is a new form of data cleaning, in my opinion. Like we give structure to that column of a description, we give structure to it using an LLM, using AI, and are very easily capable now of extracting things we couldn't do before.
Yeah.
And as you said, it used to take months or weeks to get a good script or train a model. Now it's almost instant.
So maybe also in the future, we don't need to know a regex anymore. Just ask AI.
Well, AI can write the regex then for you.
Well, it's probably it can. Huh? Like you're struggling with it. It's like, this is the kind of thing I want to extract. Give me a regex. It's probably,
Indeed.
And do you also think it will change the development process itself, like how we write data pipelines?
Yes, I think it's a new part, at least, in data pipelines. Like the example I just gave, it's like a new sort of building block that we have. Still a lot to explore. But also the need for data pipelines. Like we do see a new interface. The interface of data used to be reports. Then it became dashboards. Now it's going to chatbots. Like the human interface is changing, but you still need data beneath that. And that might require reorganizing some of the data, but maybe also in the future, it will become a lot easier to query data. But still, I don't think we are out of jobs because you will still need to organize your data. We're still looking at how is data queried, how is it approached, how do we optimize it? But it might shift our jobs a bit from data cleaning pipelines, for example, to more organizing data.
Yeah, I think data has to be even more structured. Well, I mean, the raw text can be unstructured, but your LLM needs to know where it can find which data, right?
Indeed.
I think you gave this example in a talk of yours where you said some kind of company built an app, and in the app you could find they had massive stores, and in the app you could find the toilet in their stores.
Yeah,
which is very nice. But then if you think about it, do I need to install an app to know the toilet? I just want to talk to a thing like, where are the toilets? And then like, tell me where the toilets are, right? And
exactly.
That is even more valuable to me than installing an app that tells me where the toilets are, right?
Exactly. And I think their standardization will also happen. You see that with the whole MCP story, like an interface for AI agents that we could offer. We used to offer APIs for other applications, but now this is also starting to bubble up for AI. How do we effectively offer data so that LLMs and AI agents can deal with it? And this is exactly what you say. Apps are now the interface. This will probably change in the future. So we need to be able to evolve that. And so also your data platform needs to be able to evolve.
And it's more difficult than it seems, because I know we did a project for a client in the early days of LLMs where they wanted to answer simple questions like, how many BMW X3s drive around in Antwerp?
Yeah.
Just naming something, right? And then it sounds like a very trivial question if you have the right data. And like people always imagine that you do behind the scenes, like select count star from cars where brand is BMW X3 and city is Antwerp. And then, but it's never like that.
No, it's never.
it's always like 500 different tables where you need to do some very exotic filters on weird things that only if you really truly know the data, that's like, hey, of course you need to filter out these cars, and of course you need to look at this table and not this table in that other data, whereas it almost looks exactly the same, but it's not the same. And as long as your data behind the scenes is a mess, there is not a single LLM that will answer that question for you, right?
Indeed. So structuring your data will remain important.
Even more so.
Indeed. And also the other thing you mentioned, like you really need to know the data. This is the domain knowledge, right? You need to know, even on a technical level, how is this organized in my domain? What does it all mean in order to make sense of it? I think I haven't seen two dashboards on the same data that show the same number. There's always like some discrepancy. You really need to know the data to make sense of it at this point.
Indeed. All right. So if you could give one piece of advice to a data leader today, what would it be?
It's a good one. I think to data leaders, ultimately, what we are trying to build is a data organization. So try to take your decisions so that you empower people to work with data. That's the high level advice I would give. It's about the people and we need to enable them. And that advice should boil down to all the levels in your data organization.
All the decisions should stem from that principle.
Yes, also for building a platform. We love working with technology, but ultimately, if it's not being used, if it's not enabling somebody, it's probably a bad call to make. So we need to enable the people who use it. And that works on all levels in the organization. So it's not a technological advice, this is a people advice. And this is also what we see in the industry, I think. It's all about people working with data. How do we let them effectively build data products and create value from it?
Absolutely. That's solid advice. This has been a very useful conversation around data-centric organizations. Before we go, I want to ask you a final question that I ask everyone. What is for you the biggest lesson you've learned yourself in data?
My biggest lesson, I would say it stems from the advice I would give to data leaders. It's more about the people than about the technology. We need to be able to build things for other people, being usable. And that's also what I learned. As I said, I love technology. I love tinkering with things. But ultimately, we need to develop something that's being used, that's useful, that creates value.
Coming from someone who wrote a PhD on not query performance or indexing speed.
Yes, query performance.
That's a long journey, right? To building something that people need.
I still think that is valuable. That might be another podcast topic to see how academic work leads up to value in industry in the end. But ultimately, if we build data organizations, I think the word data organizations is very powerful. It's not just a part of IT or a part in your company anymore. You are a data organization. And you need to make sure the people in that organization function as optimally as they can.
Yeah, I like that. Just like I always say, you don't have one department in your company that writes all the emails. Yeah. You should also not have one department in your organization that does all the data, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, Jonny, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.